The crunch might be the most butchered exercise of all time, but we are going to help make it a really good movement for you and work the rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscles, in a way that actually is productive. I think the biggest thing to discuss is actually what those muscles do, and that's actually something I really want you to be focused on as you're doing the movement. And so the rectus abdominis, these muscles, your six-pack muscles, they are in charge of what's called spinal flexion. They lengthen through extension, and they contract and bring the spine through flexion. And what that looks like is, in order to lengthen, we actually want to extend through the spine, which is almost like arching back. And if you do this, you will feel a stretch in the front of these muscles right here. And so they stretch through this motion here. As you can feel, you'll feel this stretch, and they contract through this motion here. And so that movement is all happening at the spine. It's not happening at the hip. And so a lot of times, as you'll see when I demonstrate, people really butcher this by coming up way too high and using too much momentum, and we will talk through all of that. But again, in order to lengthen those muscles, we need to extend through the spine this way, almost like arching back, and you'll feel that lengthening in the front of your core here. And then in order to contract these muscles and actually work them, we want to be flexing the spine. And the thing I want you to be thinking about is actually bringing your rib cage closer to your pelvis. Since you have these 2 points, you have your pelvis and your rib cage, and you're actually trying to bring those 2 points closer together. And so when you are contracting, when you're trying to contract your rectus abdominis, your ab muscles, your six-pack muscles, you're trying to bring your rib cage closer to your pelvis, like this. And when you're trying to lengthen them, you're trying to increase the space between your rib cage and your pelvis. They're much further away right now when I'm in a more lengthened position. And then when I crunch down, I'm bringing those 2 points closer together. So I'm going to show you on a Swiss ball. I'm also going to show you on an ab mat. I genuinely don't have a preference. Whatever you have available, whatever you like is totally fine. So I'm going to demonstrate a few reps, and then we'll talk about what to think about during this movement. Again, I like to actually have some form of stability, whether it's shoving my feet under the couch or a rack or having a pair of dumbbells that I can put my feet under just to stabilize the lower part of my body a little bit. I'm going to put the ball right in the middle of the lower back here. Hands really doesn't matter. I like to have them by my ears. And then we're going to move through that extension to lengthen. Now, what a lot of people will do is they'll actually go into a lot of hip flexion, and that is what ends up looking like when you do too much range of motion. So they'll go back, and then they'll sit all the way up like this. At right around here, my spine was flexed enough that my core is contracted. Here is just flexing at the hip. And so you really want to be focused on 3 things while you're doing this movement. Number 1 is reminding yourself what the abs actually do in this context. They lengthen through extension, and they shorten through flexion, and that's it. This is the end of the range of the motion. Going up any further is not shortening those ab muscles anymore. Number 2 is thinking about bringing your rib cage closer to your pelvis. As you extend back, you are lengthening, right? You're making these 2 points further away, and as you are coming up, you're bringing those 2 points closer together. That's obviously something I want you to be thinking about. And number 3 is to not use a ton of momentum. This is what that will look like. If you're just bouncing around on the ball, this is not really going to be doing anything. I want to say bullshit, but not really going to be doing anything. I want you to make sure that you're not using the bounciness of the ball to get through the movement. The point of using the ball is so that you can actually lengthen over something that's spherical, right? Something circular that you can actually extend through and lengthen the abs and then come up and press against into flexion. And so I want you to be thinking about what the abs actually do, right? We lengthen through extension, we contract into flexion. I want you to be thinking about bringing your rib cage closer to your pelvis on the way up and lengthening or increasing the distance between those 2 points on the way back. And number 3 is to not use a ton of momentum. Again, I like to have something stabilizing my feet, whether I'm using the stability ball or the ab mat, which I'll show you now. So just like the stability ball, the ab mat provides us something circular that we can extend our spine over and lengthen the abs. What that will look like is something like this. Again, I like to have something holding my feet down, whether it's a dumbbell or another person or the couch or whatever. You're going to place the ab mat right in the lower back there, and then you are going to extend over. As you can see, I'm in that very similar position where my rib cage and my pelvis are quite far apart. I'm extending through the spine. I like to keep a chin tuck. I don't like to drop my head like this. I like to keep the chin tucked. And then we are thinking about bringing these 2 points closer together and nothing more. Lengthen and extend over, stretch, keep the chin tucked, bring the rib cage closer to the pelvis. Now you could do this on your back without this, but you could do it on your back without this, just on the floor, but you would be missing out on that ability to actually really extend the spine and lengthen those muscles. It would look something like this, where you are still thinking about bringing the rib cage closer to the pelvis and pressing your lower back into the ground, but you don't really get as much lengthening like this as you would if there was something under your back, whether that's the stability ball or the ab mat. So again, the three things you want to focus on is what the abs actually do. They extend to lengthen, they flex on the way up in order to shorten or contract. Then we want to focus on bringing our rib cage closer to our pelvis on the way up and increasing the distance between those 2 points on the way back. And we also want to make sure we're not using too much momentum. Again, that would look like some bullshit like this, where you're just fucking flinging yourself through the movement like you did in middle school gym class or something like that. Want to make sure that we are controlling the movement, pay attention to the tempo that I prescribe, and you'll see that I reference this lack of momentum as a really important piece. Now, if you're interested in a little bit more of an advanced setup that might take you a little time to set up, but provides a lot of stability, let me show you that now. So this setup obviously takes some time, but having the bar sitting on top of my quads in the rack, of course, is something that really helps me feel even more stable because that point of stability is actually closer to my pelvis. I feel super duper stable here. Obviously, it does take some time to set up, but you can use the lying hamstring curl if you want to. The lying hamstring curl has a pad that you normally put your heels underneath. And if you bring the stability ball over to that, you can actually set the height of that pad up so that it's just on top of your quads, really pressing you down, making you feel super stable, and you're very welcome to give that a try. It's definitely easier than this setup, but if you're at home, this is something you can do if you feel like giving it a try.